They moved Malcolm to another room in the lodge to a clean bed. Hammond seems to revive, and began bustling around, straighten up. "Well," he said, "at least disaster is averted." "What disaster is that?" Malcolm said, signing. "Well," Hammond said, "they didn't go free and overrun the world." Malcolm sat up at one elbow. "You were worried about that?" "Surely that's what was at stake," Hammond said. "These animals, lacking predators, might get out and destroy the world." "You egomaniacal idiot," Malcolm said in fury. "Do you have any idea what you're talking about? You think you can destroy the planet? My, what intoxicating power you must have." Malcolm sat back in the bed. "You can't destroy this planet. You can't even come close." "Most people believe," Hammond said stiffly, "that the planet is in jeopardy." "Well, it's not," Malcolm said. "All the experts agree that our planet is in trouble." "Let me tell you something about our planet," he said. "Our planet is 4.5 billion years old. There has been life on this planet for nearly that long. 3.8 billion years. The first bacteria. And later, the first multicellular animals. Then the first complex creatures, in the sea, on the land. Then the great sweeping ages of animals, the amphibians, the dinosaurs, the mammals, each lasting millions upon millions of years. Great dynasty of creatures arising, flourishing, dying away. All this happening against a background of continuous and violent upheaval. Mountain ranges thrust up and eroded away. Cometary impacts, volcanic eruptions, oceans rising and falling. Whole continents moving, endless content and violent change. Even today, the greatest geographical feature on the planet comes from two great continents colliding, blocking to make the Himalayan mountain range over millions of years. The planet has survived everything in its time. It will certainly survive us. Hammond frowned. Just because it lasted a long time doesn't mean it is permanent. If there was a radiation accident... Suppose there was, Malcolm said. Let's say we had a bad one, and all the plants and the animals died, and the Earth was clicking hot for 100,000 years. Life would survive somewhere. Under the soil, or perhaps frozen in Arctic ice. And after all those years, when the planet was no longer in hospital, life again spread over the planet. The evolutionary process will begin again. It might take a few billion years for life to regain its present verity. And of course it would be very different from what it is now. But the Earth would survive our folly. Life would survive our folly. Only we, Malcolm said, think it wouldn't. Well, if the ozone layers get thinner, there will be more ultraviolet radiation reaching the surface. So what? Well, it'll cause skin cancer. Malcolm shook his head. Ultraviolet radiation is good for life. It's powerful energy. It promotes mutation, change. Many forms of life will thrive with more UV radiation. And many others will die out, Hammond said. You think this is the first time such a thing has happened? Don't you know about oxygen? I know it's necessary for life. It is now, Malcolm said. But oxygen is actually a metabolic poison. It's a corrosive gas, like fluorine, which is used to age glass. And when oxygen was first produced as a waste product by certain plant cells, say around 3 billion years ago, it created a crisis for all other life on our planet. Those plant cells were polluting the environment with a deadly poison. They were exhaling a lethal gas and building its concentration. A planet like Venus has less than 1% oxygen. On Earth, the concentration of oxygen was going up rapidly. 5, 10, eventually 21%. Earth had an atmosphere of pure poison, incompatible with life. Hammond looked irritated. So what's your point? That modern pollution will be incorporated too? No, Malcolm said. My point is that life on Earth can take care of itself. In the thinking of a human being, 100 years is a long time. 100 years ago, we didn't have cars and airplanes and computers and vaccines. It was a whole different world. But to the Earth, 100 years is nothing. 1,000,000 years is nothing. This planet lives and breathes on a much vaster scale. We can't imagine its slow and powerful rhythms, and we haven't got the humility to try. We have been residents here for the blink of an eye. If we are gone tomorrow, the Earth will not miss us. And we very well might be gone, Hammond said, huffing. Yes, Malcolm said, we might. So what are you saying? We shouldn't take care of the environment? No, of course not. Then what? Let's be clear. The planet is not in jeopardy. We are in jeopardy. We haven't got the power to destroy the planet. Or to save it. But we might have the power to save ourselves.
Four hours had passed. It was afternoon, the sun was falling. The air conditioning was back on in the control room, and the computer was functioning properly. As near as they could determine, out of 24 people on the island, 8 were dead, and 6 more were missing. The visitor center and the safari lodge were both secure, and the northern perimeter seemed to be clear of dinosaurs. They had called authorities in San Jose for help. The Costa Rican National Guard was on its way, as well as an air ambulance to carry Malcolm to a hospital. But over the telephone, the cautious. Undoubtedly, calls would go back and forth between San Jose and Washington before help was finally sent to the island. And now it was growing late in the day. If the helicopters did not arrive soon, they would have to wait until morning. In the meantime, there was nothing to do but wait. The ship was returning. The crew had discovered 3 young raptors scampering about in one of the aft holds and had killed the animals. On Isla Nublar, the immediate danger appeared to have passed. Everyone was in either the visitor center or the lodge. Tim had gotten quite good with a computer, and he flashed up a new screen.
What the hell is it doing now? Now it says there are fewer animals.
Grant nodded.
Probably. Jurassic Park is finally coming under control. Meaning what? Equilibrium. The fences have been down for hours. The animals are mingling with each other. Population is reaching equilibrium. A true Jurassic equilibrium. I don't think it was supposed to happen,
Gennaro said.
The animals were never supposed to mix. Well, they are. Is it the way you imagined? I don't know what I imagined.
He watched the monitor.
No, not exactly. You know, it appears all the adult raptors are out right now.
Grant didn't pay much attention at first. He just watched the monitors, the interaction of the great animals. Muldoon said,
We got about an hour of good daylight left, Dr. Grant, if you want to try and find that nest. Right, I do. I was thinking that, when the Costa Ricans come, they will probably imagine this island to be a military problem. Something to destroy as soon as possible. Damn right. They'll bomb it from the air. Perhaps napalm. Perhaps nerve gas as well. But from the air. I hope they do. This island is too dangerous. Every animal on this island must be destroyed. And the sooner the better. That's not satisfactory.
He got to his feet.
Let's get started. I don't think you understand, Alan,
Gennaro said.
It's my opinion that this island is too dangerous. It must be destroyed. Every animal on this island must be destroyed. And that's what the Costa Rican Guard will do. I think we can leave it in their capable hands. Do you understand what I'm saying? Perfectly. Then what's your problem? It's a military operation. Let them do it. No, we have to take care of it. Leave it to the experts. Whoa! Listen, you little bastard. You have a responsibility to this situation and you're going to start living up to it. I am. No, you're not. You shirked your responsibilities all along from the very beginning. The hell? You sold investors on an undertaking you didn't fully understand. You were part owner of a business you failed to supervise. You did not check the activity of a man whom you knew from experience to be a liar. And you permit that man to screw around with the most dangerous technology in human history. I'd say you shirked your responsibilities. Well, now I'm taking responsibility. No, you're still shrieking it. And you can't do that anymore. What have we got for weapons? We got some control nest and shock prods. How good are these shock prods? They're like banged sticks for shocks. They have an explosive capacitor tip. Delivers a shock on contact. High voltage, low amps. Not fatal, but it's definitely incapacitating. That's not going to do it. Not in the nest. What nest? The raptor nest. The raptor nest? Have you got any radio collars? I'm sure we do. Get one. And is there anything else that can be used for defense?
Muldoon shook his head.
Well, get whatever you can.
Muldoon went away. Grant turned to Gennaro.
Your island is a mess, Mr. Gennaro. Your experiment is a mess. It has to be cleaned up. But you can't do that until you know the extent of the mess. And that means finding the nest on the island. Especially the raptor nest. They'll be hiding. We have to find them and inspect them and count the eggs. We had to account for every animal born on this island. Then we can burn it down. But first we have a little work to do. Ellie was looking at a wall map, which now showed the animals' range. Tim was working on the keyboard. She pointed to the map. The raptors are localized in the southern area, down where the volcanic steam fields are. Maybe they like the warmth. Is there any place to hide down there? Turns out there is, she said. There's a massive concrete waterworks to control flooding in the southern flatlands. Big underground area. Water and shade. Grant nodded. Then that's where they'll be. I think there's an entrance from the beach too. She turned to the console. Tim, show us the cutaways on the waterworks. Tim wasn't listening. Tim? He was hunching over the keyboard. Just a minute. I found something. What is it? It's an unmarked storage room. I don't know what's there. Then it might have weapons, Grant said. They were all behind the maintenance building, unlocking a steel storm door, lifted it up into the sunlight, to reveal concrete steps going down into the earth. Damned Arnold, Muldoon said as he hobbled down the steps. He must have known this was here all along. Maybe not, Grant said. He didn't try to go here. Well then, Hammond knew. Somebody knew. Where is Hammond? Still in the lodge. They reached to the bottom of the stairs and came upon a rows of gas masks hanging on the wall in plastic containers. They shone their flashlight deeper into the room and saw several heavy glass cubes, 2 feet high, with steel caps. Grant could see small, dark spheres inside the cubes. It was like being in a room full of giant pepper mills, he thought. Muldoon opened the cap of one, reached in, and redrew a spear. He turned it in the light, frowned it. I'll be damned. What is it? Grant said. Moral 12, Muldoon said. It's an inhaling nerve gas. These are grenades. Lots and lots of grenades. Let's get started, Grant said grimly. It likes me,
Lex said, smiling. They were standing in the garage of the visitor center by the little raptor that Grant had captured in the tunnel. She was petting the raptor through the cage bars. The animal rubbed up against her hand.
Be careful there. They can give a nasty bite. He likes me. His name is Clarence. Clarence? Yes.
Muldoon was holding the leather collar with a small metal box attached to it. Grant heard the high-pitched beeping in the headset.
Is it a problem putting the collar on the animal?
Lex was still petting the raptor, reaching through the cage.
I bet he'll let me put it on him. I wouldn't try. They're unpredictable. I bet he'll let me.
So Muldoon gave Lex the collar, and she held it out so the raptor could smell it. Then she slowly slipped it around the animal's neck. The raptor turned brighter green when Lex buckled it and closed the Velcro cover over the buckle. Then the animal relaxed and turned paler again.
I'll be damned. It's a chameleon. The other raptors couldn't do that. This wild animal must be different. By the way, If they're all born females, how do they breed? You never explained that bit about frog DNA. It's not frog DNA, it's amphibian DNA. But the phenomenon happens to be particularly well documented in frogs, especially West African frogs, if I remember. What phenomenon is that? Gender transmission. It's actually just plain changing sex.
Grant explained that a number of plants and animals were known to have the ability to change their sex during life. Orchids, some fish and shrimp, and now frogs. Frogs that had been observed to lay eggs were able to change over a period of months into complete males. They first adopted the fighting stance of males, they developed the mating whistle of males, they stimulated the hormones and grew the gonads of males, and eventually they successfully mated with females.
You're kidding,
Gennaro said.
And what make it happen? Apparently the change is stimulated by an environment in which all the animals are of the same sex. In that situation, some of the amphibians will spontaneously begin to change sex from female to male. And you think that's what's happening to the dinosaurs? Until we have a better explanation, yes, I think that's what happened. Now, shall we find this nest? They piled into the jeep, and Lex lifted the raptor from the cage. The animal seemed quite calm, almost tame in her arms, almost tame in her hands. She gave it a final pat on the head, and released it. The animal wouldn't leave. Go on, shoo! Lex said. Go home! Grant held the receiver and wore the headphones. Muldoon drove, the car bouncing along the main road, going south. What is it like, this nest? Nobody knows, Grant said. But I thought you had dug them up. I had dug up fossil dinosaur nests, Grant said. But all the fossils are distorted by the weight of millennia. We have made some hypotheses, some suppositions, but nobody really knows what the nests were like. Grant listened to the beeps and signaled Muldoon to head farther west. It looked more and more as if Ellie had been correct. The nest was in southern volcanic fields. Grant shook his head. Not much about nesting behavior is clear, he said.
You have to realize, we don't know all the details about the nesting behavior of living reptiles like crocodiles and alligators. They're difficult animals to study. But it was known that in the case of American alligators, only the female guarded the nest, awaiting the time of hatching. The bull alligators spend days in early spring lying beside the female in a mating pair, blowing bubbles on her cheeks to bring her to receptivity, finally causing her to lift her tail and allow him to insert his penis. By the time the female built her nest 2 months later, the male was long gone. The female guarded her cone-shaped 3-foot-high nest ferociously, and when the hatchlings began to squeak and emerge from their shells, she often helped break open the eggs, then nudged them toward the water, sometimes carrying them in her mouth.
So the adult alligators don't protect the young? Not as we imagine it, Grant said. The biological parents both abandoned the offspring, but there is a kind of group protection. Young alligators have a very distinct distress cry. It brings any adult who hears it, parents or not, to their assistance with a full-fledged violent attack. Not a threat display, a full-on attack. Oh. Gennaro fell silent. But that's in all respects a distinctly reptile pattern, Grant continued. For example, the alligator's biggest problem is to keep the eggs cool. The nest was always located in the shade. A temperature of 98.6 degrees will kill an alligator egg, so the mother mostly guard her eggs to keep them cool. And dinos aren't reptiles. Exactly. The dinosaur nesting pattern could be much more closely related to that of any variety of birds. So you actually mean you don't know? Gennaro said, getting annoyed. You don't know what the nest is like? No, Grant said. I don't. Well, Gennaro said, so much for the damn expert. Grant ignored him. Already he could smell the sulfur. And up ahead he saw the rising steam of volcanic fields.
The ground was hot, Gennaro thought as he walked forward. It was actually hot, and here and there mud bubbled and spat up from the ground, and the reeking sulphurous steam hissed in great shoulder-high plumes. He felt as if he were walking through hell. He looked at Grant, walking along with a headset on, listening. Grant in his cowboy boots and his jeans and his Hawaiian shirt, apparently very cool. Gennaro didn't feel cool. He was frightened to be in this stinking, hellish place with the velociraptors somewhere around. He didn't understand how Grant could be so calm about it. Or the woman, Sattler. She was walking along too, just looking calmly around.
Doesn't this bother you?
Gennaro said.
I mean, worry you? We have got to do it.
Grant said. He didn't say anything else. They all walked forward among the bubbling steam vents. Gennaro fingered the gas grenades that he had clipped to his belt. He turned to Ellie.
Why isn't he worried about it? Maybe he is. But he also thought about this for his whole life.
Gennaro nodded and wondered what that would be like. Whether there was anything he had waited his whole life for. He decided there wasn't anything. Grant squinted in the sunlight. Ahead, through veils of steam, an animal crouched, looking at them. Then it scampered away.
Was that a raptor? I think so. Or another one. A juvenile, anyway. Leading us on? Maybe.
Ellie had told him how the raptors had played at the fence to keep her attention, while another climbed onto the roof. If true, such behavior implied a mental capacity that was beyond nearly all forms of life on Earth. Classically, the ability to invent and execute plans was believed to be limited to only 3 species: chimpanzees, gorillas, and human beings. Now there was the possibility that a dinosaur might be able to do such a thing too. The raptor appeared again, darting into the light, then jumping away with a squeak. It really did seem to be leading them on. Gennaro frowned.
How smart are they?
He said.
If you think of them as birds, then you have to wonder. Some new studies show that gray parrots have much symbolic intelligence as a chimpanzee, and chimpanzees can definitely use language. Now researchers are finding that parrots have the emotional development of a 3-year-old child, but their intelligence is unquestioned. Parrots can definitely reason symbolically, but I never heard of anybody killed by a parrot.
Gennaro grumbled.
Distantly, they could hear the sound of the surf on the island shore. The volcanic fields were behind them now, and they faced a field of boulders. The little raptor climbed up onto one rock, and then abruptly disappeared. Where did it go? Ellie said. Grant was listening to the earphone. The beeping stopped. He's gone. They hurried forward and found in the midst of the rocks a small hole, like a rabbit hole. It was perhaps 2 feet in diameter. As they watched, the juvenile raptor reappeared, blinking in the light. Then it scampered away. No way, Gennaro said. No way I'm going down there. Grant said nothing. He and Ellie began to plug in equipment. Soon he had a small video camera attached to a handheld monitor. He tied the camera to a rope, turned it on, and lowered it down the hole. You can't see anything that way, Gennaro said. Let it adjust, Grant said. Sounds like the nest all right, Ellie said. But you can't see anything, Gennaro said. He wiped the sweat off his forehead. No, Grant said, but I can hear. He listened for a while longer, and then he hurled the camera out and set it on the ground. Let's get started. He climbed up towards the hole. Ellie went to get a flashlight and a shock stick. Grant pulled the gas mask over his face and crouched down awkwardly, extending his legs backward. You can't be serious about going down there, Gennaro said. Grant nodded. It doesn't thrill me. I'll go first, then Ellie, then you come after. Now wait a minute. Why don't we drop the nerve gas grenades down the hole, then go down afterward? Doesn't that make more sense? Ellie, you got the flashlight? What about it? Gennaro said. What do you say? I like nothing better, Grant said. He backed down towards the hole. You never see anything die from poison gas? No. It generally causes convulsions. Bad convulsions. Well, I'm sorry if it's unpleasant, but look, Grant said. We're going into this nest to find out how many animals have hatched. If you kill the animals first, and some of them fall onto the nest in their spasms, that will ruin our ability to see what was there. So you can't do that. But you made these animals, Mr. Gennaro. I didn't. Your money did. Your efforts did. You helped create them. They're your creation. And you can't just kill them because you feel a little nervous now. I'm not a little nervous, Gennaro said. I'm scared shit. Follow me, Grant said. Ellie handed him a shock stick. He pushed his backwards through the hole, and he grunted. Tight fit. Grant exhaled, and extended his arms forward in front of him, and there was a kind of whoosh, and he was gone. The hole gapped, empty and black. What happened to him? Gennaro said, alarmed. Ellie stepped forward and leaned close to the hole, listening at the opening. Helen? I'm here. Is everything alright, Helen? Everything's fine. In the lodge, John Hammond paced back and forth in Malcolm's room. Hammond was impatient and uncomfortable. Since marshalling of the effort of his last outburst, Malcolm had slid into a coma, and now it appears to Hammond that he might actually die. Of course, a helicopter had been sent for, but God knows when it would arrive. The thought that Malcolm might die in the meantime filled Hammond with anxiety and dread, and paradoxically, Hammond found it all much worse because he dislikes the mathematician so much. It was worse than if the man were his friend. Hammond felt that Malcolm's death should occur, would be the final rebuck, and that was more than Hammond could hear. Everything... Parad. Is he awake? Hammond said. Harding shook his head. What did he say? Something about paradise? I didn't catch it, Harding said. Hammond paced some more. He pushed the window wider, trying to get some fresh air. Is there any problem about going outside? I don't think so, no, Harding said. I think this area is alright. Well, look, I'm going outside for a bit. I'll be back soon. Alright. Hammond left, stepping out into the daylight, wondering why he had bothered to justify himself to Harding. After all, the man was his employee. Hammond had no need to explain himself. He went through the gates of the fence, looking around the park. It was late afternoon, the time when the blowing mist had thinned, and the sun sometimes come out. The sun was out now, and Hammond took it as an omen. Say what they would, he knew that his part had promise. And even if that impetuous fool Gennaro decided to burn it to the ground, it would not make much difference. Hammond knew that in 2 separate vaults at InGen headquarters in Palo Alto were dozens of frozen embryos. It would not be a problem to grow them again on another island, elsewhere in the world. And if they had been problems here, the next time they would solve those problems. That was how progress occurred, by solving problems. As he thought about it, he concluded that Wu had not really been the man for the job. Wu had obviously been sloppy, too casual with his great undertaking. And Wu had been too preoccupied with the idea of making improvements. Instead of making dinosaurs, he had wanted to improve on them. Hammond suspected it darkly that was the reason for the downfall of the park. Also, he had to admit that John Arnold was ill-suited for the job of chief engineer. Arnold had impressive credential, but at this point in his career he was tired, and he was fretful, worried. He hadn't been organized, and he had missed things, important things. In truth, neither Wu nor Arnold had the most important characteristic Hammond decided, the characteristic of vision. That great wimping act of imagination which revolted a marvelous park, where children press against the fences, wondering at the extraordinary creatures come alive from their storybooks. Real vision, the ability to see the future, the ability to marshal resources to make that future vision a reality. No, neither Wu nor Arnold was suited to that task, and for that matter, Ed Regis had been a poor choice too. Harding was at the best indifferent choice. Muldoon was a drunk. Hammond shook his head. He would do better next time. Lost in his thoughts, he headed towards his bungalow. Following the little path that ran north from the visitor center, he passed one of the workmen, who nodded curtly. Hammond did not return the nod. To tell the truth, the choice of this island off the Costa Rica had also been unwise. He would not make such obvious mistakes again. Hammond spun so quickly he fell onto the path, and when he looked back, he thought he saw the shadow of the juvenile T-Rex moving in the foliage beside the flagstone path, moving towards him. What was the T-Rex doing here? Why was it outside the fence? Hammond felt a flash of rage, and then he saw the Tin Can Man running for his life, and Hammond took a moment to get to his feet and dashed blindly into the forest on the opposite side of the path. He had panicked. What a fool! He should have gone to his bungalow. Hammond cursed himself. As he got to his feet, he felt a sharp pain in his right ankle that brought tears to his eyes. He tested gingerly. It might be broken. He forced himself to put his full weight on it, gritting his teeth. Yes, almost certainly broken. Lying at the bottom of the hill, Hammond heard the Tyrannosaur roar, bellowing through the jungle. He shivered, hearing that sound. It was terrifying, a scream from some other world. He waited to see what will happen. What would the Tyrannosaur do? Had it already gotten that workman? Hammond waited, hearing only the buzz of the jungle cicada, until he realized he was holding his breath, and let out a long sigh. With his injured ankle, he couldn't climb the hill. He would have to wait at the bottom of the river. After the Tyrannosaur had gone, he would call for help. Meanwhile, he was in no danger here. The Tyrannosaur roared again, but this time in a distant musical overtone and a kind of echo. Hammond realized that Lex and Tim were in the control room messing around with some buttons. Those damn kids! He should never have brought those kids. They had been nothing but trouble from the beginning. Nobody wanted them around. Hammond only brought them here so that he thought he would stop Gennaro from destroying the resort, but Gennaro was going to do it anyway. And the kids had obviously gotten into the control room, starting fooling around. Now, who had allowed that? He felt his heart begin to race, and felt an uneasy shortness of breath. He forced himself to relax. There was nothing wrong. Although he could not climb the hill, he could not be more than 1,000 yards from his own bungalow and the visitor center. Hammond sat down in the damp earth, listening to the sound in the jungles around him. And then after a while, he began to shout for help. Everything looks different on the other side. Hardy leaned closer to him. On the other side? He thought that Malcolm was talking about dying. When shifts, Malcolm said. Shifts? Malcolm didn't answer. His dry lips moved. Paradigms, he said finally. Paradigm shift? Harding said. He knew about paradigm shift. For the last 2 decades, they had been fashionable ways to talk about science fiction change. Paradigm was just another word for a model, but as scientists used in the term it meant something more, a worldview, a larger way of seeing the world. Paradigm shifts were said to occur whenever science made a major change in the view of the world. Such changes were relatively rare, occurring about once a century. Darwin evolution had forced a paradigm shift. Quantum mechanics had forced a smaller shift. No, Malcolm said. Not paradigm. Beyond. Beyond paradigm? Harding said. Don't care about what anymore. Harding signed it. Despite all effort, Malcolm was rapidly slipping into a terminal delirium. His fever was high, and they were almost out of his antibiotics. What don't you care about? Anything, Malcolm said. Because everything looks different on the other side. You're crazy, Gennaro said to Ellie Sattler, watching as she squeezed backward into the rabbit hole, stretching her arms forward. You're crazy to do that! She smiled. Probably, she said. She reached forward with her outstretched hands and pushed backward against the sides of the hole. And suddenly she was gone. The hole gaped black. Gennaro began to sweat. He turned to Muldoon, who was standing by the jeep. I'm not doing this! Yes, you are. I can't do this! I can't! They're waiting for you, Muldoon said. Christ only knows what's down there, Gennaro said. I'm telling you, I can't do it. You have to. Gennaro turned away, looked at the hole, looked back. I can't. You can't make me. I suppose not, Muldoon said. He held up a stainless steel prod. Ever felt a shock stick? No. Doesn't do much. Almost never fatal. Generally knocks you flat. Perhaps losing your bowels. But it doesn't usually have any permanent effect. At least, not on dinos. But, then, people are much smaller. Gennaro looked at the stick. You wouldn't. I think you'd better go down there and count those animals, Muldoon said. And you better hurry. Gennaro looked back at the hole, at the black opening, a mouth in the earth. Then he looked at Muldoon, standing there, large and impassive. Gennaro was sweating and lightheaded. He started walking towards the hole. From a distance it appeared small, but as he came closer it seems to grow larger. That's it, Muldoon said. Gennaro climbed backward into the hole, but he began to feel too frightened to continue that way. The idea of backing into the unknown filled him with dread. So at the last minute he turned around and climbed head first into the hole, extended his arms forward and kicking his feet, because at least he would see where he was going. He pulled the gas mask over his head, and suddenly he was rushed forward, sliding into blackness, seeing the dirt wall disappearing into darkness before him, and then the walls became narrow, much narrow, terrifyingly narrow. He was lost in the pain of a squeezing compression that became steadily worse and worse, that crushed the air out of his lungs, and he was only dimly aware that the tunnel tiddled slightly upward along the path, shifting his body, leaving him gasping and seeing spots before his eyes, and the pain was extreme. And then suddenly the tunnel tilted downward again, and it became wider, and Gennaro felt rough surface, concrete, and cold air. His body was suddenly free, and bouncing, tumbling on concrete. Okay? He looks okay, yes. He's breathing. Fine. Can you hear? Why is everybody whispering? Because. She pointed. Gennaro turned, rolled, got slowly to his feet. He stared as his vision grew accustomed to the darkness. But the first thing that he saw, gleaming in darkness, was eyes. Glowing green eyes. Dozens of eyes, all around him. He was on a concrete ledge, a kind of embankment, about 7 feet above the floor. Large steel junction boxes provided a makeshift hiding place, protecting them from the view of 2 full-size velociraptors that stood directly before them, not 5 feet away. The animals were dark green with brownish tiger stripes. They stood upright, balancing on their stiff extended tails. They were totally silent, looking around watchfully with large dark eyes. At the feet of the adults, baby velociraptors skittered and chirped. Farther back in the darkness, juveniles tumbled and played, doing short snarls and growls. Gennaro did not dare to breathe. 2 raptors. Crouched on the ledge, he was only a foot or 2 above the animal's head weight. The raptors were edgy, their heads jerking nervously up and down. From time to time, they snorted impatiently. Then they moved off, turning back towards the main group. As his eyes adjusted, Gennaro could now see that they were in some kind of an enormous underground structure, but it was man-made. There were seams of poured concrete, and the knobs of protruding steel rods. And within this vast, echoing space were many animals. Gennaro guessed at least 30 raptors, perhaps more. It's a colony, Grant said, whispering. 4 or 6 adults, the rest juveniles and infants. At least 2 hatchings, 1 last year and 1 this year. These babies look about 4 months old, probably hatched in April. One of the babies, curious, scampered up on the ledge and came towards them squeaking. It was now only 10 feet away. Oh, Jesus, Gennaro said. whispered. "Why aren't they attacking?" Grant shook his head. "They must not see us, and there aren't any eggs at the moment. Makes them more relaxed." "Relaxed? How long do we have to stay here?" "Long enough to do the count." As Grant saw it, there were 3 nests, attended by 3 sets of parents. The division of territory was centered roughly around the nest. Although the offspring seemed to overlap and run into different territories, the adults were banging with the young ones, and tougher with the juveniles, occasionally snapping at the older animals when their playing got too rough. At that moment, a juvenile raptor came up to Ellie and rubbed his head against her leg. She looked down and saw the leather collar with the black box. It was damp in one place, and it had chafed the skin of the young animal's neck. "You think I can take it off?" "Just do it quickly." "Okay." "Oh, shit," Gennaro said under his breath. "Don't move," Grant said. "Stay calm." The adult walked past him, his long curved toes clicking on the concrete. The animal paused in front of Ellie, who stayed crouched by the juvenile behind a steel box. The juvenile was exposed, and Ellie's hand was still on the collar. The adult raised his head and sniffed the air. The adult's big head was very close to her hand, but it could not see her because of the junction box. Grant reached for a gas grenade, plugged it from his belt, held his thumb on the pin. Gennaro put out his restrained hand, shook his head, nodded to Ellie. She wasn't wearing her mask. Grant set the grenade down, reached for the stuck prod. The adult was still very close to Ellie. Gennaro gave a long exhalation. "Jesus, can we leave?" "No," Grant said, "but I think we can get some work done now." In the phosphorescent green glow of the night vision goggles, Grant peered down into the room from the ledge, looking at the first nest. It was made of mud and straw, formed into a broad, shallow basket shape. He counted the remains of 14 eggs. Of course, he couldn't count the actual shells from this distance, and in any case, they were long since broken and scattered over the floor. But he was able to count the indentations in the mud. Apparently, the raptors made their nest shortly before the eggs were laid, and the eggs left a permanent impression on the mud. He also saw evidence that at least one had broken. He credited 13 animals. The second nest had broken in half, but Grant estimated it had contained 9 eggshells. The third nest had 15 eggs, but it appeared that 3 eggs had been broken early. "What's the total?" Gennaro said. 34 born, Grant said. "And how many do you see?" Grant shook his head. The animals were running all over the cavernous interior space, darting in and out of the light. "I have been watching," Ellie said, shining her light down at her notepad. "You'd have to take photos to be sure, but the snout markings of the infants are all different. My count is 33. And juveniles? 22. But Alan, do you notice anything funny about them?" "Like what?" "How they arrange themselves spatterly. They're falling into some kind of a pattern or arrangement in the room. It's pretty dark. No, look. Look for yourself. Watch the little ones. When they're playing, they thumple and run every each way. But in between, when the babies are standing around, notice how they arrange their bodies. They face either that wall or the opposite wall. It's like they're lined up." "I don't know, Ellie. You think there's a colony meant to structure? Like bees?" "No, not exactly," she said. "It's more subtle than that. It's just a tendency." "And the babies do it?" "No, they all do it. The adults do it too. Watch them. I'm telling you, they lined up." Grant frowned. It seems as if she was right. The animals engage in all sort of behavior, but during pauses, moments when they are watching or relaxing, they seem to arrange themselves in particular ways, almost as if there were invisible lines on the floor. "Beats me," Grant said. Maybe there's a breeze. I don't feel one, Alan. What are they doing? Some kind of social organization expresses a spatial structure? That doesn't make sense. Because they all do it. Gennaro flipped up his watch. I knew this thing would come in handy one day. Beneath the watch face was a compass. You have much use for that in court? No, Gennaro shook his head. My wife gave it to me for my birthday. He peered at the compass. Well, they're not lined up according to anything. I guess they're sort of northeast-southwest. Something like that. Maybe they're hearing something, turning their heads so they can hear. Grant frowned. Or maybe it's just a ritual behavior, she said. Species-specific behaviors that serves to identify themselves to one another. But maybe it doesn't have any broader meaning. Or maybe they're weird. Maybe dinosaurs are weird. Or maybe it's some kind of communication. Grant was thinking the same thing. Bees do communicate spatially by doing a kind of dance. Perhaps dinosaurs could do the same thing. Why don't they go outside? They're nocturnal. Yes, but it almost seems like they're hiding. Grant shrugged. In the next moment, the infants began to squeak and hop excitedly. The adults watched curiously for a moment. John Hammond sat down heavily in the damp earth of the hillside and tried to catch his breath. Dear God, it was hot, he thought. He felt that he was breathing through a sponge. He looked down at the stream bed, now 40 feet below. It seems like hours since he had left the trickly water and began to climb the hill. His ankle was now swelling and dark purple. He couldn't put any weight at all, which now burns with pain from exertion, and he was thirsty. Before leaving the stream behind, he had drunk from it. Even though he knew this was unwise, now he felt dizzy, and the world sometimes thrilled around him. But he knew he had to climb the hill and get back to the path above. Hammond thought he had heard footsteps on the path several times during the previous hour, and each time he had shouted for help. But somehow his voice hasn't carried far enough. He hadn't been rescued. And so as the afternoon wore on, he began to realize that he would have to climb the hillside, injured leg or not. And that was what he was doing now. Those damn kids! Hammond shook his head, tried to clear it out. He had been climbing for more than an hour, and he had gone only a third of the distance up the hill. And he was tired, panting like an old dog, his leg throbbing. He was dizzy. Of course, he knew perfectly well that he was in no danger. He was almost within sight of his bungalow. For God's sake. But he had to admit he was tired. Sitting on the hillside, he found he didn't really want to move anymore. He was 76 years old. That was no age to be climbing around hillsides, even though Hammond was in peak condition for a man of his age. Personally, he expected to live to be 100. It was just a matter of taking care of yourself, of taking care of things as they came up. Certainly, he had plenty of reasons to live, other parks to build, other wonders to create. He had been hearing small animals all afternoon. There were all kinds of things out here. Rats, possums, snakes. The squeaking got louder, and small bits of earth rolled down the hillside past him. Something was coming. Then he saw a dark green lizard hopping down the hill towards him. And another. And another. Compies, he thought with a chill. Scavengers. The compies didn't look dangerous. They were about as big as the chickens, and they moved up and down with a little nervous jerks, like chickens. But he knew they were poisonous. Their bite had a slow, active poison that they used to kill crippled animals. The first of the compies pierced in the hillside, staring at him. It stayed about 5 feet away, beyond his reach, and just watched him. Others came down after, and they stood on a row, watching. They hopped up and down, and chattered, and waved their little clawed hands. Shoot! Get out! The compies backed away, but only a foot or two. They weren't afraid. They seemed to know he couldn't hurt them. Angrily, Hammond tore a branch from a tree and swung at them with it. The compies dodged, nip at the leaves, squealing happily. They seemed to think he was playing a game. He thought again about the poison. He remembered one of the animal handlers had been bitten by the compies in the cage. The handler had said the poison was like a narcotic, peaceful, dreamy, no pain. You just want to go to sleep. The hell with that, Hammond thought. Hammond picked up a rock, aimed carefully, and threw it, striking one of the compies in the chest. Hammond turned away and started to climb the hill once more, holding branches on both hands. He hopped on his left leg, feeling the ace on his thighs. He had not gone more than 10 feet when one of the compies jumped on his back. He flung his arm wildly, knocking the animal away, but lost his balance and slid back down the hillside. As he came to a stop, a second compy scrambled forward and took a tiny nip from his hand. He looked with horror, seeing the blood flowing over his fingers. He turned and began to scramble up to the hillside again. Another compy jumped onto his shoulder, and he felt a brief pain bit to the back of his neck. He screeched and smashed the animal away. He turned to face the animals, breathing hard, and they stole all around him, hopping up and down and cocking their heads, watching him. From the bites of his neck, he felt rapt fluid through his shoulder, down his spine. Lying on his back on the hillside, he began to feel strangely relaxed, detached from himself, but he realized that nothing was wrong. No error had been made. Malcolm was quite incorrect of his analysis. Hammond lay very still as a child in its crib, and he felt wonderfully peaceful. When the next compy came up and bit his ankle, he made only a half-hearted effort to kick it away. The little animals edged closer. Soon they were chirping all around him, like excited birds. He raised his head as another compy jumped onto his chest. The animal surprisingly light and delicate. Hammond felt only a slight pain, very slight, as the compy bent to chew his neck. Chasing the dinosaurs, following the curve and the slump of concrete, Grant suddenly burst out through the cavernous opening and found himself standing on the beach, looking at the Pacific Ocean. All around him, the young velociraptors were scrambling and kicking in the sand, but one by one, the animals moved back into the shed of the palm trees at the edge of the mangrove swamp, and there they stood, lined up in their peculiar fashion, watching the ocean. They stared fixedly to the south. "I don't get it," Gennaro said. "I don't either," Grant said. It said that they clearly don't like the sun. It wasn't very sunny on the beach. A light mist blew, and the ocean was hazy. But why did they suddenly left the nest? What had brought the entire colony to the beach? Gennaro flicked up the dial in his watch, and looked at the way the animals were staring. Northeast, southwest. Same as before. "At least we know how they got out of the fence," Ellie said. "That's why they came out?" Gennaro said. Grant nodded. They must have heard it coming. As the fridger passed, all the animals watched it, standing silently, except for an occasional chirp and squeal. Grant was struck by the coordination of their behavior, the way they moved and acted as a group. But perhaps it wasn't really so mysterious. In his mind, he reviewed the sequence of events that had begun in the cave. First, the infants had been agitated, then the adults had noticed. And finally, all the animals had stampeded to the beach. The sequence seems to imply that the younger animals, with keener hearing, had detected the boat first. Then the adults had led the troop out to the beach. As Grant looked, he saw the adults were in charge now. There was a clear stationary organization along the beach. And as the animals settled down, it was not loose and shifting the way it had been inside. Rather, it was quite regular, almost regimented. The adults were spaced, very 10 yards or so, each adult surrounded by the cluster of infants. The juveniles were positioned between and slightly ahead of the adults, but Grant also saw that all the adults were not equal. There was a female with a distinctive stripe along her head, and she was in the very center of the group as it ranged along the beach. The same female had stayed in the center of the nesting area too. He guessed that, like certain monkey troops, the raptors were organized around the matriarch pecking order, and that this striped animal was the alpha female of the colony. The males, he saw, were arranged defensively at the perimeter of the group. But unlike monkeys, which were loosely and flexibly organized, the dinosaurs settled in a rigid arrangement, almost a military formation it seemed. Then too, there was an oddly of a northeast-southwest spectral orientation. That was beyond Grant, but in other sense, he was not surprised. Paleontologists had been digging up bones for so long they had forgotten how little information could be gained from a bone. Bones might tell you something about gross appearance of an animal, its height and weight. They might tell you something about how the muscles attached, and therefore something about the crud behavior of the animal during life. They might give you clues to the few diseases that affected bone. But a skeleton was a poor thing, really, from which to try and deduce the total behavior of an organism. Oh my God, Grant said. He stared at the raptors, ranged along the beach in the rigid formation, silently watching the boat, and he suddenly understood what he was looking at. Those animals, Gennaro said, shaking his head. They sure are desperate to escape from here. No, Grant said. They don't want to escape at all. They don't? No, Grant said. They want to migrate. Migrating, Ellie said. That's fascinating. Yes, Grant said. He was grinning. Where do you suppose they want to go? I don't know, Grant said. And then a big helicopter burst through the fog, thundering, wheeling over the landscape. Their underbellies heaved with armament. The raptors scattered in alert as one of the helicopters circled back, following the line of the surf, and then moved in to land on the beach. A door was flung open, and soldiers in olive uniforms came running towards them. Grant heard the rapid babble of voices in Spanish, and saw that Muldoon was already on board with the kids. Please, you will come with us. Please, there is no time. Grant looked back at the beach where the raptors had been, but they were gone. All the animals had vanished. It was as if they never existed. The soldiers were tugging at him, and he allowed himself to be led beneath the thumping blades and climb up through the big door. Muldoon leaned over and shouted in Grant's ear, "They want us out of here now! They're going to do it now!" The soldiers pushed Grant and Ellie and Gennaro into seats and helped them clip on their harness. Tim and Lex waved to him, and he suddenly saw how young they were and how exhausted. Lex was yawning, leaning against her brother's shoulder. An officer came towards Grant and shouted, "Senor, are you in charge?" "No," Grant said. "I'm not in charge." "Who is in charge, please?" "I don't know." The officer went on to Gennaro and asked the same question. "Are you in charge?" "No," Gennaro said. The officer looked at Ellie, but said nothing to her. The door was left open as the helicopter lifted away from the beach, and Grant leaned out to see if he could catch a last look at the raptors. But the helicopter was above the palm trees, moving north over the island. "What about the others?" "They have already taken off, Harding and some workmen. Hammond had an accident. Found him on a hill near his bungalow. Must have fallen." "Is he all right?" "No. Compy's got him." "What about Malcolm?" Muldoon shook his head. Grant was tired of feeling much of anything. He turned away and looked back out the door. It was getting dark now, and in the fading light, he could barely see the little Rex with bloody jaws crouch over a hadrosaur by the edge of the lagoon and looked up at the helicopter, roaring as it passed by. Somewhere behind them, they heard explosions. Then ahead, they saw another helicopter wheeling through the mist over the visitor center. And a moment later, the building burst in a bright orange fireball, and Lex began to cry. And Ellie put her arms around her and tried to get her not to look. Grant was staring down at the ground, and he had a last glimpse of the Hypsilophodontids leaping gracefully like gazelles. Moments before, another explosion flared bright beneath them. Their helicopter gained altitude, and they moved east, out over the ocean. Grant sat back in his seat. He thought of the dinosaurs standing on the beach, and he wondered where they would migrate if they could. And he realized he would never know. He felt sad and relief at the same moment. The officer came forward again, bending closer to his face. "Are you in charge?" "No," Grant said. "Please, senor, who is in charge?" "Nobody," Grant said. The helicopter gained speed as it headed towards the mainland. It was cold now, and the soldiers muscled the door shut. As they did, Grant looked back just once, and saw the island against a deep purple sky and sea, cloaked in a deep mist that blurred the white-hot explosion that burst rapidly, one after another, until it seems the entire island was glowing, a diminishing bright spot in the darkening night. Days went by. The government was polite and put them in a nice hotel in San Jose. They were free to come and go and to call whomever they wish, but they were not permitted to leave the country. Each day, a young man from the American embassy came to visit them, to ask if they needed anything, and to explain that Washington was doing everything could to hasten their departure. The plain fact was that many people had died in a territorial possession of Costa Rica. The plain fact was that the ecological disaster had been nearly averted. The government of Costa Rica felt it had been misled and deceived by John Hammond and his plans for the island. Under the circumstances, the government was not disposed to release survivors in a hurry. They did not even permit the burial of Hammond or Ian Malcolm. They simply waited. Each day, it seems to Grant he was taken to another government office, where he was questioned by another quarter's intelligent government officers. They made him go over his story again and again, how Grant had met John Hammond, what Grant knew of the project, how Grant had received the facts from New York, why Grant had gone to the island, what had happened at the island. The same details again and again, day after day, the same story. For a long time, Grant thought they must believe he was lying to them, and that there was something they wanted him to tell, although he could not imagine what it was. Yet, in some odd way, they seemed to be waiting. Finally, he was sitting around the swimming pool of the hotel one afternoon, watching Tim and Lex splash, when American and Kaikis walked up. "We have never met," the American said. "My name is Marty Gutierrez. I'm a researcher here at the Carrara station. You were the one who found the original specimen of Proconsagophus." "That's right, yes." Gutierrez sat next to him. "You must be eager to go home." "Yes," Grant said. "I have only a few days left to dig before the winter sets in. In Montana, you know, the first snow usually comes in August." "Is that why the Hammond Foundation supported northern digs? Because the intact genetic materials from dinosaurs are more likely to be recovered from cold climates?" "That's what I presume, yes." Gutierrez nodded. "He was a clever man, Mr. Hammond." Grant said nothing. Gutierrez sat back in the pool chair. "The authorities won't tell you, because they are afraid, and perhaps also resentful of you for what you have done. But something very peculiar is happening in the rural regions." "Biting the babies?" "No, thankfully that has stopped. But something else. This spring in the East Maluya section, which is the north, some unknown animals ate the crops in a very peculiar manner. They move each day, in a straight line, almost as straight as an arrow, from the coast, into the mountains, into the jungle." Grant sat up. "Like a migration," Gutierrez said. "Wouldn't you say?" "What crops?" Grant said. "Well, it was odd. They would only eat amaga beans and soy, and sometimes chickens. Foods rich in lysine. What happened to these animals?" "Presumably," Gutierrez said, "they entered the jungle. In any case, they have not been found. Of course, it would be difficult to search for them in the jungle. A search party could spend years in the East Maluya Mountains with nothing to show for it. And we are being kept here because..." Gutierrez shrugged. "The government is worried. Perhaps there are more animals, more trouble. They're feeling cautious." "Do you think there are more animals?" Grant said. "I can't say." "Can you?" "No," Grant said. "I can't say." "But you suspect?" Grant nodded. "Possibly there are. Yes." "I agree." Gutierrez pushed himself from his chair. He waved to Tim and Lex playing in the pool. "Probably they will send the children home. There's no reason not to do that." He put on his sunglasses. "Enjoy your stay with us, Dr. Grant. It is a lovely country here." "You're telling me we're not going anywhere?" "None of us are going anywhere, Dr. Grant," Gutierrez said, smiling. And then he turned and walked back towards the entrance of the hotel.